Today, I'll be giving you all an in-depth look at my 1996 Chevrolet K1500 Silverado step-side. For those of you who have not seen this truck before, I bought it a while back for like 500 bucks. It needed a motor and a whole bunch of other things, so I ended up filming a multi-part little mini-series, if you will, on fixing this thing up. And at this point, I've done pretty much everything that I wanted to do to the truck, so I figured now was as good a time as any to film a review. As with all of my reviews, I'm going to cover all of the ins and outs and take this thing on a thorough drive. We've got a whole lot of stuff to cover, so without further ado, let's go ahead and start her up and let her run. This generation of Chevrolet truck has been rising in popularity with collectors and builders for the last decade or so. It's no surprise, especially with my generation, as this is the stuff we grew up with and so desperately wanted back in the day when the ability to drive seemed so far away. I have fond memories of watching Chevrolet's classic Like a Rock commercials and thinking just how cool those trucks were. For me, buying this truck was an awesome opportunity to get into an OBS Chevy for little money and bring it back to its former glory. There's just something that's so gratifying about taking something that was destined for the junkyard and giving it a new lease on life. I wanted to keep everything as stock or original as possible, but make a few small improvements here and there. While I didn't make a ton of videos in this series, unlike some of my other builds, this was one of the most fun projects I've done thus far. When these trucks were first introduced in 1988, they were a dramatic departure from the long-running square-body Chevys that had been in production since 1973. Along with being a significant visual departure, there were even more noteworthy changes underneath. For example, this generation was the first GM pickup to have an independent front suspension on 4x4 models, with torsion bars and CV joints replacing the solid front axle and leaf springs found in the previous generation. Another change was shift-on-the-fly four-wheel drive, which replaced the previous generation's manually locking hubs. The frame was widened too in order to move the fuel tank more inboard for added safety. Over their 10-plus year lifespan, these trucks just got better and better in terms of design, comfort, reliability, power, and safety, with some of the biggest changes arriving in the mid-90s. Marketed as the C and K trucks for two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive respectively, the nomenclature was different as the name Silverado originally denoted the top trim level as it did in years before. It wasn't until the generation after this that the Chevy trucks adopted Silverado as the truck's official name, at which there were different trim levels of the Silverado. Of course, there were plenty of body and bed configurations to choose from, not to mention a plethora of engine and transmission combinations. Early on, there were three trim levels: Cheyenne, Scottsdale, and Silverado. The Scottsdale was eventually dropped from the lineup. Offered in 1500, 2500, and 3500 grades, there was plenty of capability for whatever your needs were. Styling-wise, there were several changes leading up to 1996. In 1990, Chevrolet ditched the original quad glass headlamps for composite headlamps with serviceable bulbs. In 1994, there was an exterior facelift that featured a redesigned grille and the addition of a third brake light for added safety. A cargo lamp also became standard. In 1995, New composite breakaway side view mirrors were added. Largely, the overall body styling of these trucks remained unchanged, except in 1996 when extended cabs began offering a third door for better access to the rear seat. There were 10 exterior colors offered in 1996, with this truck being finished in Victory Red. There's a lot of great things about these trucks, but there's also some things to be aware of if you're looking to purchase one. For one, rust can be an issue, mainly in the cab corners, rocker panels, and wheel arches. This truck needs cab corners, but it otherwise is rust-free, thankfully. Another issue is interior plastics, but this mainly pertains to the earlier interior design. Depending on how these trucks are cared for, the plastics can easily become discolored, deteriorated, brittle, and broken. Clear coat and paint is another common issue with many 80s and 90s vehicles, and the OBS trucks were not immune. The clear coat on most of this truck is cracked or peeled off completely. Aside from that, these trucks are simple, solid, and easy to work on. There's huge aftermarket support as well, so whether you are interested in maintaining, restoring, or resto-modding, there's plenty of ways to get your truck taken care of. For this truck, I left the exterior largely unchanged. It's far from perfect, but it cleaned up really well. I did install a new grille with all new front lights and new front and rear bumpers. I also ended up converting all of the rear lights to LED. In 1996, regular cabs and extended cabs were offered with a choice between a sport side short bed, a fleet side short bed, or a fleet side long bed. Crew cab models were only available with a fleet side long bed. For those not familiar with the terms, the fleet side had straight sides that were flush with the cab. The sport sides had inset sides relative to the cab with step treads and flared wheelhouses. Being that the step treads are pretty high, it's more of a cosmetic step side than a true step side like what was offered way back in the day. Still, I've always thought they looked cool. You take a slight penalty in overall bed space, but not much. The bed length spans 78.7 inches, while bed width spans 49.1 inches. The width is the same width that fleet sides had in between the wheelhouses. Without the inset portions, fleet sides had a max bed width of 64.4 inches at the front of the bed and 61.9 inches at the rear of the bed. Fleet sides also had the benefit of two-tier loading, as the indented sidewalls allowed the use of planks or 2x6s to create two loading tiers or separate upper and lower cargo areas. Unfortunately, there aren't any kind of tie-down hooks built into the bed itself, but there are holes on each corner at the top that can be used to hook ratchet straps to or install some aftermarket tie-down provisions. There's a button on the dash to activate the cargo lamp so you can see better at night. This truck, as equipped, was rated to haul up to 1,663 pounds and tow up to 6,000 pounds. A couple of things I did back here was special order a plastic bed liner, which was surprisingly hard to find, and install a weatherproof roll-up bed cover. The bed floor had some dings in it, so the cover helped freshen things up a tad and give some extra durability. The bed cover is super easy to use and secures at the front with a couple of clips. We took this truck on a number of out-of-state trips, and the cover proved quite useful in keeping luggage and other things out of the elements. Wheel and tire setups for these trucks were pretty simple and mainly depended on the trim level and whether you were opting for two-wheel drive, which was only offered with 5-lug 15-inch wheels, or four-wheel drive, which was only offered with 6-lug 16-inch wheels. There were basic steel wheels with traditional chrome rally trim, chromed steel wheels, and aluminum wheels. There was a minor cosmetic change for the aluminum wheels in 1996. The center caps are smooth compared to prior years, which had simulated lug nut covers. The aluminum 16-inch wheels on this truck are 6.5 inches wide and are wrapped in 245/75 all-terrain tires. The brakes consist of power-assisted, internally ventilated 11.6-inch discs in front and 11.15 by 2.75-inch drums in the rear. The disc brakes are clamped down by single-piston calipers. Four-wheel analog brakes are standard. Especially compared to today's trucks, the brakes leave a lot to be desired. They work just fine in stopping the truck, but they're a bit spongy, and the single-piston calipers don't bite as hard as some would prefer. Thankfully, there are tons of aftermarket brake upgrades for these trucks if you were looking to get a more substantial setup. I ended up replacing all of the brakes and hardware on this truck, but being that I was trying to keep things simple, I stuck with original equipment replacement parts. The backbones of these trucks is a ladder-type frame with heavy C-channel side rails and boxed sections for added strength. The cross members are bolted, welded, and riveted to resist twisting and flexing. From the factory, the entire frame would have been dipped in a hot wax bath to help it resist corrosion. I was shocked at how clean this truck was overall. Like I said earlier, it needs cab corners, but everything else is pretty much flawless, as good as it can get for one of these trucks. The front suspensions differed a bit between two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive trucks, although they shared the same basic independent design with upper and lower control arms. Along with twin-tube shock absorbers and a standard stabilizer bar, two-wheel drive trucks utilized coil springs, while the four-wheel drive trucks utilized torsion bars and CV joints. For 1996, four-wheel drive trucks received a new cast lower control arm design that was claimed to offer greater durability. The rear suspensions were shared, consisting of a solid axle with two-stage multi-leaf springs and splayed twin-tube shock absorbers. With the optional Z71 package on 4x4 trucks, aluminum skid plates were added to protect the transfer case and front differential. You also got heavier-duty shocks, all-terrain tires, and Z71 graphics. This truck also has the optional G80 locking rear differential, which works quite well. The steering system is power-assisted with a variable ratio and features a steering gearbox mounted on the frame rail, along with a pitman arm and idler arm to help locate the center linkage and tie rods. The steering's variable ratio made low-speed maneuvering easy, while providing excellent response and on-center feel at higher speeds. The Silverado trim included a leather-wrapped steering wheel as standard equipment. Without a doubt, the biggest change for the 1996 model year was the introduction of a whole new lineup of gas engines. Despite having the same displacements as before, the engines all had significant increases in horsepower and torque ratings compared to their predecessors. The new engine lineup fell under new nomenclature too, Vortec. With half-ton trucks, you had the option of a 4.3-liter V6, a 5-liter V8, or a 5.7-liter V8. This truck, equipped with the 5.7-liter, boasts 50 additional horsepower for a total of 250 at 4,600 RPM and 335 pound-feet of torque at 2,800 RPM. While not exceptionally powerful by today's standards, the strong low-end torque greatly improved towing performance of these trucks, especially when towing up steeper grades. They also proved to be quite a bit more refined in daily use, thanks to a new high-efficiency ignition system, a more driver-friendly progressive throttle linkage, and more. Some additional benefits also included new 100,000-mile coolant and 100,000-mile tune-ups. One of the reasons I got this truck so cheap is that it needed a motor, amongst a whole bunch of other things. I ended up replacing it with a low-mile 5.7-liter Vortec that was pulled from a wrecked work truck. In the process, I tore the engine down, resealed the whole thing, did a valve job, and replaced everything else, including all of the accessories, sensors, and more. Because of how long it sat before I bought it, I also replaced the entire fuel system, including the lines, tank, sending unit, and fuel pump. Another new feature for 1996 was an aluminized stainless steel exhaust system from the catalytic converter back for added corrosion resistance. Unfortunately, the original cat was stolen off this truck and the rest of the exhaust was butchered, so I took the opportunity to have a little fun by installing a custom true dual exhaust system with a dual in, dual out Black Widow muffler and quad stainless steel tips. I also installed replacement catalytic converters to retain the original functionality. It's an aggressive sounding exhaust setup that snaps and crackles like crazy. It's extremely entertaining. The engine features cast iron construction for the block, heads, and exhaust manifolds. The intake manifold is a two-piece design, with the lower portion being aluminum and the upper portion being composite. The sequential fuel injection unit is located within the intake manifold. The SFI system alone was a huge improvement over the previous throttle body fuel injection setups. The valve train consists of an overhead valve layout with 2 valves per cylinder. The compression ratio is 9.4 to 1. Max engine speed is around 5,500 RPM. An all-new OBD2 system introduced a new generation of onboard diagnostics by enabling technicians to provide quick and more accurate service. This was by far the most advanced Gen 1 small block V8 that Chevrolet ever produced. Even though there were a ton of these engines made, they were relatively short-lived as the all-new Gen 3 LS-based truck motors were just a few years away. Another pretty cool feature added for 1996 was an underhood tool storage compartment. One of my favorite features, though, is the underhood light that mounts to the firewall. It's actually removable and comes with a magnet on the backside. You can unwind it from the housing, and the lengthy cord allows you to take it all the way to the back of the truck for an extra helping hand when working at night. When you're done with it, simply reel it back into its housing and secure it in place. As far as fuel economy, the 5.7-liter Vortec ran on regular unleaded. Fleet-side short bed and sport-side models had a fuel capacity of 25 gallons. Fuel economy isn't that great, as this truck is currently rated between 11 miles per gallon in the city and 15 miles per gallon on the highway. In day-to-day use, I saw around 13 or 14 miles per gallon. As far as transmissions, there were 2 to choose from, including a standard 5-speed manual or an optional 4-speed electronically controlled automatic with overdrive. With the automatic, you had a 3.42 final drive ratio, but with the manual, you had the option of either a 3.42 ratio or a 3.73 ratio. The transmission performs exactly as it should, with smooth shifts and automatic compensation for load and grade variances. The transmission can be a weak point for these trucks, though. In fact, this truck's original transmission was replaced with a new GM Goodwrench unit some time ago. Four-wheel drive was of course optional, but in 1996 you had a choice between a manual transfer case selector in the floor or the new electrically operated InstaTrack system. The latter required you to get the automatic transmission, but it allowed shift on the fly from two-wheel drive high to four-wheel drive high and back at any road speed. It's super convenient. Chevrolet introduced an all-new interior for the C&K trucks in 1995, which significantly modernized things and added a big dose of comfort and premium amenities. I've always liked the simplicity of the earlier OBS trucks, but you can't deny the improved quality of these interiors. This is another area where I did a lot of work. Due to a leaky windshield and back glass, I ended up replacing them both and installed new carpet as well as new sound deadening. I ended up using Second Skin automotive insulation to add significantly more sound deadening than what the factory offered, which made a huge difference, especially with having the louder exhaust. Aside from a thorough cleaning, the interior didn't need much else. It was in fantastic condition already. The Silverado, being top of the line, gave a unique luxury feel to these trucks. Along with additional sound insulation compared to what came on a Cheyenne, you had higher quality standard cloth upholstery and the option of premium leather upholstery. There were 4 interior colors available: gray, blue, red, and tan. With the nicer upholstery came more premium door trim panels with color-keyed vinyl wrapping and cloth inserts, as well as molded armrests and carpeted lower areas with matte pockets and lighted red and white reflectors. Color-keyed carpeting was also standard, along with front and rear floor mats with extended cabs. Power windows, locks, and mirrors were also standard on the Silverado. In my opinion, these newly contoured seats at the time offered the most comfort compared to the Ford F-Series and the Dodge Ram. Extended cab trucks were offered with 3 front seat options. The Cheyenne had a basic 60/40 bench that was wrapped in vinyl or cloth. Silverados came standard with a reclining 60/40 bench that was wrapped in higher quality custom cloth. The Silverado bench also had a center storage armrest. This truck has the option of the high back reclining bucket seats with a multi-feature center console. Speaking from experience, the optional leather was incredibly soft and supple. However, long term, the cloth had better durability. I firmly believe these trucks had better interior build quality and were more comfortable than the generation that followed. Powered lumbar was standard for the driver and front passenger on the Silverado, while power sliding and tilting was an option for the driver's seat. The bucket seat design also incorporated fold-down armrests. A tilt steering wheel is standard on the Silverado, along with electronic cruise control. In 1996, Silverados also became available with a new electrochromatic rearview mirror that offered auto-dimming and a built-in compass. The power ports in the lower portion of the dashboard also offered better access with a separate ashtray cover. As far as the audio system, there were a few different options for the Silverado. The standard setup, which this truck had originally, was an AM/FM radio with a built-in cassette tape player. The next rung up was essentially the same radio but with extra features, like automatic tone control, speed compensated volume, preset scan, theft lock, and more. The other 2 options included a radio with a CD player or one that offered both a CD player and a tape player. The standard 4-speaker sound system was basic at best. However, Silverados also had the option of a 6-speaker enhanced performance sound system. I swapped out the base radio for an aftermarket double-din radio, which required me to get a custom dash bezel so that it installed properly in place of the original radio, which was a 1.5-din unit. The bezel allowed for factory-style positioning of the climate controls and a new storage pocket beneath them. I ended up painting the air vents and cup holders to match the bezel. With the new radio, I have access to Apple CarPlay, which includes navigation, hands-free telephone, music streaming, and more. It definitely makes life easier with driving an older vehicle in this technology-driven world we live in. CFC-free air conditioning was standard on the Silverado and optional on the Cheyenne. It's super easy to operate with 3 twist dials. The center console in this truck is pretty cool as it offers a lot of functionality. In addition to having a front compartment for stowing cassette tapes or CDs, there's a large covered compartment and goodies for the rear passengers. The top tray flips forward to act as a clipboard if you wanted to secure a notepad. While this truck doesn't have it, the newly optional easy access system on extended cab short bed Silverados featured a swing out panel located behind the passenger side door for convenient rear seat access for passengers or cargo loading. This limited the need to put the seats forward for rear seat access. That being said, there are no grab handles or any kind of device to make rear seat ingress any easier, so having the third door option was a nice touch. The passenger seat, being that it doesn't have the power adjustments on the driver's seat, can be tilted and slid all the way forward, making rear seat access quicker and more convenient than it would be coming from the driver's side. While extended cabs are far more practical than regular cabs, they don't offer near as much passenger volume as you would find in a full-size crew cab. Headroom is not an issue, it's the limited leg space. I'm 5 foot 10 inches, and while I could fit in the back, I'd have to put my legs to the side to allow the front seat backs enough room. If you needed to, you could sit 3 people in the rear seat, as there's 3 sets of seat belts, but only the outboard positions have headrests. Additional rear seat amenities include ashtrays and large storage pockets on the either side panel, overhead illumination, and in the back of the center console, 2 pop-out cup holders and an additional storage compartment. The rear seat can also be folded down or flipped up depending on storage needs. Underneath the seat on the passenger side is where you'll find all of the tire changing equipment. A full-size spare tire is located underneath the rear of the truck.